At the edge of the Des Plaines River, 9 miles from Chicago's center, we find a unique example of the 19th century's most talented landscape architects, engineers, and architects working together to create a new kind of community, one in which nature would become an integral and essential part of everyday living for all its residents. The result was Riverside, where families would dwell together amid a setting of wooded groves and meadows along a curving stream. In 1869, the landscape architectural firm of Frederick Law Olmsted and his partner Calvert Vaux prepared the General Plan of Riverside. They created one of the earliest totally planned suburban communities, a rural, self-contained community providing all the civilizing advantages found in the city at that time within a rural, country-like atmosphere. These civilizing advantages included such amenities as easy access from Chicago. The train had already been extended here, and Olmsted proposed a divided approach road to link to the city. Riverside had the best engineered streets of the time, with cobblestone gutters for proper drainage, sewers, water lines, gas lines, and gassed street lamps. To provide the rural, country-like setting, vast amounts of public lands were set aside, almost half of the entire village. There are two large commons, Scottswood and Long Common, an extensive riverbank area, triangular islands dispersed throughout the village, and varying public right-of-ways. All the best land was for the public use for all time. The depressed curvilinear roadway system broke away from the typical grid street plan. There were large residential lots, and residents were encouraged to plant 2 trees in their front yard, as nature and the landscape was always to be of the utmost importance throughout the village. By 1871, Riverside had a water tower, a commercial building, the Union Church, a new train depot, and a 125-room hotel. Over 50 homes had been completed. The Great Chicago Fire and the subsequent financial panic in 1873 left the Riverside Improvement Company bankrupt. But fortunately for us, Olmsted's plan was basically complete, becoming in time the outstanding example of suburban town planning that it is today. In 1970, Riverside was designated a National Historic Landmark for its contribution to the history and the development of the United States. Over the years, the village has attracted works of outstanding architects, and many of these structures remain today. In 1991, the village adopted a preservation ordinance to protect Riverside's plan with its public lands. Within this ordinance, significant historical structures may be designated as local landmarks. Today, there are over 50. In this series, we will look at 4 of the landmark homes. These owners have graciously agreed to let us explore their property from the outside and the inside. So now, let's begin our tour.
From this angle, you can see why the Tomek house is unusual. It was not only the mother of the Roby house, which is well known as one of Wright's most famous buildings, but here you see something that he did not even copy in the Roby house. He attached a service quarters, but there's a marvelous large cantilever in the back also, and you can see the supports that support the steel beams that make this come out. This one has not been touched. The one out front has been reinforced when we took the pillars down that the Tomeks had added onto it. But here you can really see the window ribbons that wrap around, and that there are very few walls in this house, that it seems made of glass. The roofs sort of overlap on each other and cross. There are shifting planes. Even the front door has a little cantilever coming out that shelters you and causes a transitional space between the outside and the inside. Here you would be coming up with a carriage. On the carriageway, the edges are there to prevent the wheels from slipping off. You could enter the house even by going behind the parapet and entering on the porch. You could go at the steps and go up to the second level right away. It shows an interesting intersection of what the high mass of the 3 stories and the one of the 2-story mass of the living room that causes here again a shifting of the planes into each other. The massive chimney seems to be the only vertical element in this very horizontal house, which is even emphasized by all the dark brown trim around the light-colored windows. If in 1906 you came to visit Emily and Ferdinand Frederick Tomek, you might come in through the front door or on the carriageway on the other side and come up the wide stairs alongside of the original coloring. And this was quite an unusual grand entrance. You come into the hall and the maid would lead you to the reception room where you would take off your coat and hat and adjust your makeup if you had any, and you could leave your card on a silver platter, which she then would take into the living room to see if Mrs. Tomek would be receiving you. In this reception room here, which was a typical feature of a house built in that time when the social structure was such that ladies were receiving Emily on Thursdays according to the Blue Book, a listing of fashionable addresses. And in this little room the wall colors were different. There was a dark chocolate and a milk chocolate and then a sand-colored ceiling. And this was also typical in a way of the Victorian age. Beecher sisters had even written about that in The American Home, a book published in 1869. And here, then, you would go past the portiere back into the living room and visit with Emily Tomek. Welcome to the living room of the F.F. Tomek house, built for Emily and Ferdinand Frederick Tomek. It is a large, generous room for entertaining, but it has a small area for intimate conversation at the other end. where we are standing now. And we're looking at the large fireplace with a typical Roman brick with different color grouting to emphasize the horizontality. It is raked out on the light colored one and it is brown on the vertical one. There is a lot of horizontality that is stressed in the windows on the north side, the little windows on the south side, which allow for a lot of passive solar heating in the summertime. Underneath them are the radiator grills, which are flush with the wall, which is unusual, and makes for a very nice smooth surface. Above us are the steel beams that support this large room. The ceiling is one of repose but has a certain trim in it. The floors are most unusual for a Frank Lloyd Wright house, a lovely parquet because Mr. Tomek was into room moldings and special woods. The windows are quite simple as Wright windows go for that time of his inventive life. But there was no need to make them elaborate because the house was set so far back from the street that there was plenty of privacy. As you will notice, most of the art glass panes are a lovely fall color yellow, but if you go on the outside you will see that they are iridescent and have greens and blues and hot pinks and reds and yellows in them. Wright determines in here where the furniture has to be. He makes you come in through either door or from the bridge of the dining room and right away makes you go out again through the French doors. So there is no place to put cabinets against the wall because you'd be bumping into them. He wants you to sit down and there the ceiling rises. The ceiling in the walkways is still the original plaster. You are in the dining room of the Tomek house with a nice brass plate on the door for the Tomeks. There's a black one for the maid. She got discriminated against. There is a built-in sideboard, typical of Wright. He liked to build in as much furniture as he could. And it is very tricky because it has a mirror at the bottom and it has glass on the top, providing all kinds of play of light or interplay when you're sitting at the table. And the bridge that leads from the living room comes into the dining room. Here you find this expanse of 12 windows in a row. This was most unusual, especially for this time. It must have been a shocker of a house for most people to see this. You will see the pattern in the windows. It has 4 little stripes on top of the eyes and the nose of the yellow one. And you will find these 4 stripes back in the border of the parquet floor that alternate. There are original fixtures of gas and electricity. Of course, electricity was not so reliable in 1906. And the ceiling light is quite remarkable. No dangling chandeliers here with crystal, but a very simple light which gives beautiful light on the table. We also have these lights mounted on the sides that can provide another way of lighting your dining room. It is an elegant dining room and adapts to large parties as well to small ones because there is an alcove and there is the breakfast area. And through the dining room door you come in a hallway where there is a stair coming up, and the iceman cameth in those days to the ice box, and then you came into the kitchen, which was a galley kitchen, a little more than that really, where only the maid reigned, and Mrs. Tomek would give her instructions. For us it seated 6 easily, and it's very convenient, very efficient. And I redid it with the cabinets in oak, felt I deserved oak, but the maid had maple beforehand. I designed it the way I wanted it, and only later did we see on the plans that I had done pretty much what Wright had, but there were cabinets with glass front faces, and I think I tried to do what he would have done for me in the 70s. So we updated it and we put the windows back in that the previous owners had removed in order to put in a St. Charles kitchen, as you can see on one photograph. And I ordered lamps from Scandinavia which sort of look like the Guggenheim Museum and give a warm light in this kitchen. From the dining room you can go upstairs, but of course in 1906 no one but only the owners went upstairs. 3 bedrooms upstairs with 1 bath. There's a powder room on the 2nd floor and a bathroom on the 1st level where the maid has her quarters, and there are 2 bedrooms down there. And here you see the original bathroom with the original bathtub from Mr. Wolfe, as well as the lovely sink with its elegant legs. The trim continues nicely around the edge of the medicine cabinet. The walls are tile, and so are the floors. And then if you were a gentleman and you were calling on Ferdinand one evening and the ladies had been receiving during the day, you might come in through the fancy front door or come down the stairs if you came by carriage and go into the billiard room where the men would gather, where there was a fireplace and probably a long, low lamp hanging over a large billiard table, and with 5 windows, but it would be very cozy with a fire in the fireplace. And there was a bar at the end, and the door in the middle hides a big wine cellar that is underneath the porch. And there are plenty of closets also to hide your cues from your billiard playing. And so people would go and play cards or billiards with each other. And here you are in the billiard room looking at the fireplace, and above it a painting of the front cover for Down to Earth, a book about the Tomek house. You see in the ceiling, which is plain beadboarding, it's low-cost paneling. Here they did not go all out, except for the nice quarter-sawn oak that is encasing the beams, the steel beams that support the huge floor of the living room. And so as structurally it's interesting that the beams also make the ins and outs of the ceiling, so it is not a straight, flat, boring ceiling either. The house itself has been standing here since 1906 and is for sale at the moment for the right owner. The next right owner, that is.